Something big could be brewing right now, and if you're a Seahawks fan, this is the kind of situation that can completely change how we look at this team heading into the season. There's a real chance Seattle makes a bold move that could take an already strong unit and turn it into one of the most dominant in the entire league. It's the type of decision that doesn't come around often, and when it does, it can define the future of the franchise. So if you're a true fan and want to stay well-informed, click the like button and comment, "Go Seahawks!" The possibility of a major shakeup involving Dexter Lawrence is starting to feel less like speculation and more like something that could unfold at any moment. And for the Seattle Seahawks, this is exactly the kind of situation that could redefine the trajectory of the franchise moving forward. According to the latest reports, there is a growing belief around the league that the New York Giants are heading toward a trade involving their star defensive lineman, and the reason is becoming clearer by the day. Contract negotiations between Lawrence and the Giants have reached what insiders are calling a serious impasse, with both sides reportedly far apart financially, and that gap doesn't seem to be closing any time soon. What makes this even more intriguing is that multiple credible voices are aligning on the same message. Ian Rappaport brought the initial bombshell, pointing out that the two sides are nowhere near a deal and that a trade could realistically happen before the NFL draft. That alone would be enough to get attention, but when you also have Mike Garafolo reinforcing the same idea, it starts to carry real weight. The Giants, publicly at least, have tried to maintain the stance that they want to keep Lawrence, but even their own general manager Joe Schoen admitted that a resolution could go in different directions, which is not exactly a strong vote of confidence in a long-term agreement being reached. So now the conversation shifts to Seattle, and whether this is a move that John Schneider should seriously consider. On the surface, some might argue that the Seahawks don't necessarily need Dexter Lawrence. The interior defensive line was already one of the strongest units on the roster last season. But that's exactly where this becomes interesting, because this isn't about filling a weakness. This is about turning a strength into something potentially dominant across the entire NFL. Imagine a rotation featuring Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jarran Reed, and adding Dexter Lawrence into that mix. It's not just good, it's overwhelming. It's the kind of group that can take over games without needing to rely heavily on blitz schemes or risky defensive calls. Even more compelling is how Lawrence would fit within Mike Macdonald's defensive system. This is a scheme designed to maximize disruption up front, creating opportunities for defensive linemen to attack quarterbacks and collapse pockets consistently. Lawrence, even in what was considered a down year statistically, still commands attention from opposing offenses. And when you place him in a situation where he's no longer the sole focal point of protection schemes, everything changes. Suddenly, he's not facing constant double teams, and that opens the door for him to return to elite production levels. And if offenses shift their attention toward him, that frees up players like Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams to capitalize. It becomes a ripple effect that offenses struggle to contain. Of course, none of this matters if the financial side doesn't work, and that's where things get more complex. Lawrence is reportedly seeking around $30 million per year, which would place him among the highest-paid defensive linemen in the league. The Giants appear unwilling to meet that number, which is a big reason negotiations have stalled. But Seattle is in a very different position. The Seahawks currently have close to $30 million in available cap space, and with some flexibility in how they manage the roster, there are ways to make a deal like this work. And this is where John Schneider's long-term planning comes into play. The Seahawks are not just building for one season. They are trying to create sustained success, and that requires being aggressive at the right moments. There's been a clear indication that the front office wants to make a significant move, something that signals intent not only to compete now, but to establish a foundation for the future. Letting that cap space sit unused doesn't align with that vision. A move for a player like Dexter Lawrence would send a very clear message that Seattle is ready to take that next step. There's also a generational angle to this that shouldn't be ignored. The current interior defensive line, while effective, is not getting any younger. Leonard Williams is already in his 30s, and Jarran Reed is not far behind. Retirement conversations have already surfaced around some of these veterans, and even if they continue playing, there's an inevitable transition coming. Lawrence, on the other hand, is still in his late 20s, meaning he can be both a present-day impact player and a bridge into the next era of Seahawks football. If structured correctly, a contract could align perfectly with that timeline, allowing Seattle to maintain stability on the defensive line for years to come. Now, when it comes to what it would actually take to get this deal done, one proposed scenario includes the Seahawks sending their first-round pick, number 32 overall, along with a 2027 fifth-round pick to the Giants in exchange for Lawrence. At first glance, that might feel like a steep price, but when you really break it down, it starts to make sense. There's a strong argument that no player available at pick 32 would provide the same level of impact as Dexter Lawrence. In a way, it's like using that pick on a proven elite talent rather than hoping to develop one. From the Giants' perspective, it also aligns with their current direction. They appear to be shifting toward a younger core, potentially building around a quarterback like Jaxson Dart, and by the time that roster is ready to compete at a high level, Lawrence might no longer fit their timeline. Add in the financial gap and the reported breakdown in negotiations, and a trade becomes not just possible, but logical. What's becoming increasingly clear is that this situation is reaching a breaking point. Reports indicate that discussions have not only stalled, but may have completely broken off, and there is already significant interest from teams across the league. That means if Seattle wants to be in the conversation, they won't be alone. They'll need to act decisively and be willing to commit both financially and in terms of draft capital. And that brings us to the real question surrounding all of this. If the opportunity presents itself, if the Giants officially put Dexter Lawrence on the trade block and the Seahawks have a chance to land him, should Seattle go all in and make this move happen, or is the cost too high for what they already have on the roster? And this is where things get even more intense, because once you move past the idea stage and into reality, the pressure shifts directly onto John Schneider and the Seahawks front office. This isn't just about identifying a talented player. This is about timing, competition, and conviction. Because if the reports are accurate, and multiple teams are already monitoring this situation closely, Seattle won't have the luxury of waiting around to see how things play out. They'll need to be proactive, aggressive, and absolutely certain that this is the move that elevates them above the rest of the NFC. Think about what the Seahawks would be signaling to the league if they pull this off. For years, conversations around the NFC West have been dominated by teams like the 49ers and Rams when it comes to bold roster construction and headline-grabbing moves. This would immediately shift that narrative. Bringing in a player like Dexter Lawrence wouldn't just be about improving the defensive line, it would be a statement that Seattle is done playing it safe and is ready to impose its identity physically, especially in the trenches where games are often decided. And let's not ignore the psychological impact inside the locker room. When a front office makes a move of this magnitude, players notice. It sends a message that management believes this team is ready to compete at the highest level right now. That kind of confidence can ripple through the roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where competition would instantly rise. Iron sharpens iron, and adding Lawrence into that rotation would force everyone to elevate their game. But there's also a risk here that cannot be ignored. Committing around $30 million per year to a defensive tackle while also giving up a first-round pick is not a small decision. It limits flexibility in other areas and puts pressure on Lawrence to perform at an elite level consistently. If for any reason he doesn't meet those expectations, the move could quickly be criticized. That's the reality of high-stakes roster building in the NFL. Every big swing comes with the possibility of missing. At the same time, standing still carries its own risks. The Seahawks have built a solid foundation, but in today's NFL, being solid often isn't enough to get you deep into the playoffs. The teams that separate themselves are usually the ones willing to take calculated risks to acquire elite talent. And that's exactly what Dexter Lawrence represents, even coming off a season that wasn't considered his best. His track record over the previous years shows exactly the kind of disruptive force he can be when everything is aligned around him. Another layer to this is how the draft strategy would shift if this trade happens. Giving up the 32nd overall pick means Seattle would be betting on proven production over potential. It's a philosophical decision as much as it is a roster one. Do you trust your scouting and development enough to find impact players later in the draft, while using premium assets to secure established stars? Or do you stick to building through the draft and hope those players reach their ceiling? This move would clearly place Seattle in the first category. And then there's the timing. With the NFL draft approaching quickly, this situation could escalate at any moment. If the Giants decide to officially move on, the window for making a deal could be incredibly short. These are the moments where front offices earn their reputation by being prepared to act when opportunity knocks. Schneider has positioned the Seahawks with cap space, draft capital, and roster flexibility. Now it becomes about execution. Everything we're seeing right now points toward a potential turning point, not just for the Seahawks, but for how they're perceived across the league. Are they a team that's content to compete, or one that's ready to dominate? A move like this would answer that question in a very loud way. Now it's your turn to be part of this conversation. Would you make this trade if you were in charge, or do you think Seattle should hold on to its picks and build differently? Drop your take, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you enjoyed this breakdown, and click on the video that's on your screen right now, because the latest Seahawks news and analysis, you're only going to find it right here. Go Seahawks!